Hi, everyone. Welcome to another interview with some leaders from the world of sustainable finance. I'm very, very excited for this interview because I recently got to meet Alice at a summer camp held by the Institute for Social Banking in Luxembourg. And I was really excited to learn more about the organization she works for. She's the Knowledge and Network Manager at the Global Alliance for Banking Values, or the GABV, as one of the acronyms in sustainable finance. And it's a very good acronym to know about because of the transformational work the organization is trying to do within the field of sustainable finance and get banks to incorporate values. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you are facilitating the exchange of knowledge and best values and value-based banking. And learn a little bit more about your career. So Alice, why don't you tell us who you are and why you're here today?
Sure. Thank you so much, Stephen, for that nice introduction. It was really great to meet in Luxembourg. I think it's these kind of gatherings of people who are motivated and committed to changing finance that really sparks ideas and inspiration. So it's great to be here with students who are eager and motivated and share a little bit about the GABV and share a little bit about my journey in finance. So my name is Alice Khounta. As Stephen said, I'm the Knowledge and Network Manager at the GABV. I'm American, but also technically Dutch. I have a Dutch citizenship as well. Grew up on the West Coast of the United States in California. And my background is actually not in finance. It is in marketing communications. And I really thought I would have a career in marcoms, and that was going to be it. And that's what I did for many years. Lived in different countries around the world and worked in advertising, PR, marketing communications, mostly in the IT sector, but also in agencies, working with internet startups. Since I'm from the California Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, that was a big part of the career opportunities at the time. And then a few years ago, I just realized I really wasn't satisfied with what I was doing. And I felt that the work was interesting. I loved being kind of the cutting edge of technology, but I didn't feel like I was having any positive impact on the world or on the people around me or the community that I was living in. And so I did some soul searching to look about what is it that I could do, and kind of fell into sustainability. I volunteered for a network called the Sustainable Business Network. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and the Sustainable Business Network is an organization that helps businesses transform to more sustainable practices. And I was doing comms work for them. And it just clicked to my head that if you can help businesses make the step, then you can get this momentum going and create change. And so it just clicked to my head that this is what I wanted to do. And then I realized I really didn't understand sustainability and what it meant. And so I went back to school. I got my master's in sustainable business and innovation, and never thought that I would work in finance, to tell you the truth. It was the last industry that I'd ever imagined working in. And when I stumbled upon the GABV and learned about what they do, it completely changed my perspective about the role of finance and the impact that finance can have on people and communities around the world. And that's where I am today, working for the GABV. So I thought that I could share a few slides to give you a bit of background about the GABV and what we do, if that's all right, Stephen.
Yeah, it would be great to learn a little bit more, and so exciting to hear about your transition. I know a lot of us here in this call are also going through that transition now of how do we make ourselves more sustainable and the work we do more impactful. So yeah, would love to hear about the GABV and what you're doing there now.
Sure, I can do that. And just one thing about that kind of personal journey, I think everyone has their journey that you'll go through life, and it's never a straight line. So you might think you want to do one thing and then you find out something takes you on a tangent. But I think all those experiences do eventually lead you to where you should be. And if you just take those opportunities and learn as much as you can, you'll find that those experiences will somehow build your character and your knowledge base, and somehow it'll all come together and make sense. So it's all right to be searching. I think I mentioned earlier before we started recording that sustainable finance just wasn't in mainstream vocabulary when I was in school. And I think it's great that it is now. There's a lot more awareness around it, and that there are many more opportunities to work in sustainable finance. And I really encourage you to do so, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I'll jump into the GABV. If I can share my slides here and tell you a little bit about the organization where I work. Can everyone see that? Yep, great. So the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, or the GABV, is a, if I can get this to work here. My slides are not moving forward here. There we go. The GABV is a network of independent banks using finance to deliver sustainable economic, social, and environmental development. And what sets us apart from mainstream banks is our vision of using finance at the service of people and the planet. Whereas many conventional banks nowadays are putting more focus on sustainability, what our banks do is really at its core. It's always been the intention and the vision to serve people and the planet. So we're more than just a network. We're actually more, we see ourselves more as a movement of innovative leaders in sustainable finance. And we're growing. We have almost 70 members now. This slide's a little bit old. 70 members worldwide in more than 40 countries. We're supported by 16 supporting partners, which consist of development finance institutions, NGOs, advocacy groups, but various organizations in the sustainable field, also research and academic institutions. And while our banks are generally smaller than a lot of the big mainstream banks, collectively, we're quite a force. We have more than 80,000 employees combined, over 200 billion US dollars in assets, and over 60 million customers. And just to give you a picture of where we're located, we're all over the place. Originally, we were started by 10 banks that were mostly based in Europe and Bangladesh and the US. And now, as you can see, we're all over the place. And at our core, we're a CEO level network. So we, before we accept any member in, we really ensure that the CEO is committed to sustainability and that their mission is aligned with the values that we are promoting. So our banks are very different. We have large banks, small banks, credit unions, microfinance institutions. But what we have in common is this commitment to the GABV principles, which are listed here. I won't go into too much detail, but it's a triple bottom line approach to people, planet, and prosperity, which is at the heart of the business model. We focus on the real economy, so real small businesses, people, nothing fancy, no derivatives and all that complicated financial models. We have long-term relationships with our clients. We're very client-centered, and we take a long-term approach for resiliency. So trying to make sure that our organizations and our customers are able to withstand disruptions. We're very transparent in our reporting about what we do and what we invest in, and also our governance structures. And then I think the most important principle is really that we embed all of these principles into the culture of the organization. So it's not enough just to sit at the CEO level. We really try to make sure that all the employees within the organizations understand these principles, live them, use them in their work, and that they're always thinking about these principles when they're doing their work. And what do we do? So simply, we finance change for the people that we, for our customers. And we also try to change the finance industry. So from an internal perspective, we are a network of peers, of CEOs. We also have communities of practices for marketing communications leads, human development leads, non-executive board directors. And we facilitate, the GABB Secretariat facilitates knowledge sharing and learning amongst these CEOs. So even if you're a bank in Europe, there's still things to be learned from banks in Latin America. They do things differently, but with the same intention. So there's lots of different ideas that come about when you bring these CEOs together to talk and share what they're doing in various elements of their businesses. And also to foster collaboration. So we have a lot of examples of banks coming together and doing partnerships and bringing board members to different organizations or distributing funds from one bank to another. So there's lots of collaboration that happens between our members. And then from an external perspective, what we try to do is set the standard for what values-based banking should look like. So we create visibility to media, to public, to regulators, to people of influence, to show that the values-based banking model works and that you can have banks that are profitable and still be doing positive things for communities and for the environment and not hurting the environment or communities that they should be serving. We advocate for change at a regulatory level. We work with other organizations to advocate for change at the EU level. We engage with regulators. So we're also trying to make people of influence, policymakers, aware of different models of banking and that it is viable, and to try to encourage other mainstream banks to change their ways. It's not easy, very challenging, but we have proof through our own experiences that this model works. We've got 70 members around the world doing this, and they're having incredible impact on the communities they serve. So we know it works. And we're hoping in an ideal world that all banks would work in this kind of model. But we know that there's a long ways to go before that happens. And that's the GABB in a nutshell.
Thanks, Alice. I think that was a great summary of all of the amazing work that the GABB is doing in educating and training the CEO level in sustainable finance. I was thinking how it sounds very similar to the work we're doing with the Sustainable Finance Toolkit, educating and training the much younger level, the career starters, the researchers, the young professionals. And yeah, maybe you could share a little bit more on that experience of like, what are some learnings and like, how does the GABV go about this like training and knowledge share? And what is something that we can take away from that and how we approach and motivate young professionals to get in and do this as well?
Sure. I think what's important to understand is that we are a CEO level network, and it's always been that way. And the reason for that was originally our founding is that there were a group of CEOs in 2009 who were operating in a very different environment. This is right after the global financial crisis, who were already doing business differently and looking at environmental and social impact of their businesses. And then this whole GFC happened, and everyone hated banks, and they said, oh, banks are corrupt and look at what they've done, and we're now having to bail them out. And these banks said, well, but it doesn't have to be this way. Look, we've been operating for years and we're doing well, and we're having a positive impact. So that's why these CEOs originally came together to say, let's join forces and show the world that that there's a different way of banking possible. And we've grown from that. And I think what the challenge is for these CEOs is that they're operating usually in a market where they're the only ones doing what they're doing. And sometimes they're not taken seriously, although nowadays they are, because there's a lot more attention towards banking and finance. But back, in the early days, maybe less so. But it can be a lonely place to be when you're out there pioneering different business models and different approach to finance. So by bringing these CEOs together, we give them an opportunity to share their experiences. And we do that through various events. Our main event is an annual meeting once a year, hosted by one of our member banks, where we bring all the CEOs together for about 3 days. And we have sessions where they can share what they're doing on certain topics, certain current areas where there's a lot of focus or challenges. We bring in expert speakers to inspire them to think also differently and possible different approaches, or to educate them. For example, for carbon accounting, there's an organization called PCAF, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting and Financials, and the GEBV was well, it existed already, but the GEBV was instrumental in making it a global initiative. It had originally started in the Netherlands, grew a little bit to some European banks, and because of our global network, we introduced it to our members in North America and Latin America, and got them to sign and to start using the methodology to measure their carbon accounting emissions or carbon emissions. So that's kind of the role we play, is to help bring the knowledge into the network to challenge the CEOs, but also to help them learn from one another and from others outside as well. We also have regional meetings. So we're a global network. It's hard to get these CEOs all together at one time. So we also have regional meetings. And we were very challenged by COVID because there's something special about coming and meeting someone in person, as you probably all experienced. And virtual, although it's effective in many ways, it doesn't replace that warmth that comes with meeting someone and having an informal conversation outside of business. And that's where that trust is built, so that CEOs, they get to know each other. They feel confident and comfortable enough to just pick up the phone and give another CEO a call and say, so, I'm having this problem. How would you approach it? Or what are you guys doing? I think it's those relationships that get built through those personal connections that makes that network really effective. So your asked question about how to do this, I think bringing people together is critical, and of course, as much as possible in person. We do have a lot of banks concerned about their carbon footprint of travel, and Stephen would know this, that we had in Luxembourg, we had one participant coming from Denmark to Luxembourg, which is not that far, but it took him like 18 hours because he was taking the train, and there were train delays. And so it is a challenge, but there are ways to offset that, so you can have a carbon neutral footprint. And so we do that as well for our events.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear about the connections that get developed by being close in person. And we know that very well with just finishing up our camp in Barcelona, and how those connections really foster the next wave, the next level of events, the next partnerships. And I'm excited to have this conversation be part of that, as a coming from me and you meeting in Luxembourg. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't meet in person.
Exactly. I think that's it, and you meet lots of people through your life and career, and you never know when that connection somehow comes around full circle. It's interesting to see how you do bump into people when you're in the sustainability world. You do end up bumping into each other quite a lot.
Yeah, and in a good way. We need those partnerships.
You do. That's critical too. I think you just said the key word, partnerships, Stephen. Partnerships, collaborating together.
Absolutely. Welcome, Oliver. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting into some Q&A with Alice. And there's a few questions that I saw coming from our participants. I think Margaret had a really good one related to what we were talking about. Margaret, would you like to jump in?
Yes. Hi, Alice. I would like to know if you could please share with us any kind of engagement that those banks are doing internally for cultural change with their employees. I think is more critical, that change the mindset of the employees working for those banks. So if you could maybe share a little bit about what they are doing or trying to do for more engagement.
Sure. Well, actually, one of the other roles that I have, besides being the knowledge network manager and supporting the CEOs, is I coordinate the human development community of practice, which is all of the HR managers of our banks. And that's been a really great experience to get insight into the challenges from an internal perspective of how do you attract the right people, how do you keep them engaged and motivated and stay. And it is a serious challenge. I do know that our members have a process of making sure they hire the right people up front and making sure that people are aware that they're not just joining a typical bank, that their bank has certain values that guide their actions and behavior. And I think that's critical, is that onboarding process of making sure that employees realize that they're signing up not just for a job, but something that's bigger than that. But it is an ongoing challenge to make sure that motivation and engagement stays there. We do that even from our secretariat perspective. Every time we get a new member, we have an assessment process before we even bring a new member on to make sure that their values are aligned with our values and that the CEO is aligned. But then we also take them through an induction process where we have one-on-one meetings with the CEOs and their kind of deputy and also the leads of the communities of practice to make sure that all different levels of the organization are aware of what the GABV is, what our principles are, and so that they can apply that in their own domains. So with your marketing communications or strategy development or metrics and research, that people who are in those departments understand that they're part of something bigger than just their own bank. I think that's the power of a network as well, is sometimes when you're in an organization, you're very internal focused. You just look at your own operations and maybe, and of course your customers and your own market. But when you step back and you realize that there's a bigger movement around you and that you're part of a network of banks around the world that are doing something similar, but in a different context, it's quite powerful. So I think that there's opportunity for learning there as well at all different levels of an organization. But I think the onboarding is the critical moment when you first capture an employee. I'll just give you one little story about one of our banks in the Netherlands, Triodos. And I know that one person, when he was interviewed, he didn't have a background in finance either, but he'd done stuff with music and other things. And he went to Triodos Bank because he was aligned with the values of the bank. That's what attracted to him. He wouldn't have gone to a conventional bank, but he saw something about what the bank does and their mission and purpose. And that's what attracted him. And I think that's what many employees do. They are attracted by the values of an institution, and that's why they want to work there. But he was surprised that they actually were very focused on all this other stuff that he'd done. And he said, he was very honest, I don't have a banking background, but I'm good at this, this, and this. And they said, that's okay, we can teach you banking. We want to know who you are as an individual. What kind of person are you? And what values are you bringing to our organization that you will help us move our movement forward? And I think that's important, to look at the person and not necessarily only the skill set.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you. I feel like the onboarding process is really important just at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Bhargav had a really good question related to the work you're doing, Alice, so I'll let him jump in. But we did have a few questions around your values and the impact you're having. So maybe after we talk a little bit more, Yulia, you can jump right in and ask your question. Bhargav, would you like to voice yours first?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So my question is, since you transition from marketing to sustainable finance, like how are you personally reflecting? Because you mentioned that you thought you're not having that much of a positive impact through your previous job than you're doing now. So how was the transition, and like what's your personal reflection on that?
Good question. It wasn't so much that I didn't enjoy marketing communications, and the IT sector. I like innovation, so I really love learning about new technologies. But at the end of the day, what my role was to promote these companies and their products and services. And their products and services generally were not having necessarily a positive impact on the environment or on people. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't do a marketing communications role in a sustainable company. So just to make that clear, but I wanted to be more hands-on and have that direct impact and challenge myself. And so I feel now I'm working with organizations and supporting them to have those direct impacts. Again, I'm a step removed. I'm in a secretariat, so I'm not in the bank itself doing the work. But I love hearing ideas and seeing that there's opportunities to use those ideas in other markets. So I like connecting people and connecting ideas, and that for me is personally fulfilling. And I know that when we organize these events and meetings, and I see people or CEOs go, oh, that's a great idea. I can do that at my bank. That's fantastic. And I know that that's going to have a positive impact on the products and services that they offer. I think one thing that's really critical is this sort of sense of intentionality that our banks have. They don't create products and services for the sake of creating them. They look at where the problem is from an environmental and social perspective, and they go, how can we solve that problem through our financial products and services? So that's a very different approach than a mainstream bank might take. So it's really being very intentional and purposeful in how you operate. So there's always that consideration of, if we create this product, what kind of impact is it going to have? Yes, it might make us money, but that's not the goal. Of course, you need to make money to stay profitable and sustainable and resilient long term. But that's kind of a byproduct of the intention of why you create a product or service. So I like seeing that. And so in my role, I feel like I'm able to help facilitate that.
For your answer, can I just move on with my question now? Okay. I have a bit of transition related question as well. You mentioned that you were working in Sustainable Valley. So my question was like, how can we speed up the transition process? How can we get how can we incorporate startups and IT, these values, these banking values, and the business ethical business practices? How can we make this transition process speed up? Do we use the toolkits we already have? Do we use platforms we already have, or we need more platforms, like more specified platforms for startups or IT? Is it better to invest in the already existing platforms, or creating more platforms with different values, different aspects of the sustainability?
I'm sorry, your connection was not totally clear. So I think I sort of understood the gist of your question. It's, you have existing toolkits, but how do you speed up the process of motivating fintechs and other banking sector players to speed up their transition to more sustainable practices? Do you start with existing companies, or do you inspire more new companies? If I understood that correctly. Yeah.
If we start with new platforms instead of companies like yours, do we create more platforms, or do we invest our time in new? Do we create new platforms, or do we invest our time in already existing ones and making them more general, more common?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that kind of question applies almost in general with any kind of approach to investing in sustainability, because our banks are struggling now because they have, in a way, to decide, do you work with your customers who are maybe not so sustainable and help them make that transition? Or do you just say, I'm not going to invest in those kind of companies. I'm only going to invest in the companies that are already sustainable, or business models. And I think there's room for both. It's always good to inspire new entrepreneurs who are starting out, because they have a blank slate. And if you can already get these ideas in their head that they consider sustainable impact in their business model, then it makes it a lot easier, because they're starting from scratch. It's harder to move a large ship. So if you've already got a company that's doing business a certain way, to get them to change, it's hard. You have a lot of resistance. Because they might have already had investments in certain technology or platforms. So it's harder, but it doesn't mean you should give up on them, because sometimes it's those bigger companies that have the most impact already. So if you can get them to change, then you're, in terms of the size of your impact, it might be actually larger. So I'd say it's a combination of both. Creating toolkits for new startups is really helpful because they don't know anything. They're learning, so they're just sponges absorbing information. So if you can come to them with already, I don't know, toolkits that will help them get a leg up, that's great. And then for the companies who are already doing business a certain way, who want to change, they need help too. So if you can provide toolkits to say, look, you're doing this and this, but have you considered doing this? Or here are small steps you can take to start transitioning your business, that's helpful as well. I think speaking at events, if you have, I know there are lots of fintech conferences. So fintechs are a great opportunity for sustainable companies because they're so nimble and they don't have all the legacy systems in place. They can change easily. But maybe speaking at those kind of conferences or getting on a panel to present your ideas would be helpful.
Thank you for your answer.
Sure.
Thank you, Alice. And thanks for talking a little bit more about your journey and this journey that you see the industry going on. In the interest of time, I want to kind of close up our conversation, and then you can leave us with any thoughts or inspiration that you might have for us. But Madeline had sent me a question about how can students get involved in the GABV? And this is something we talked a little bit about when we were together, about how do we broaden the values that are being talked about at the GABV at a very high level of corporation to the employees and to the ones who are coming in, those doing the internships, and the students who are doing the research. What can you share, and how could oikos in general get involved in the work that the GABV is doing? How can we be supportive?
Well, from a network perspective, if you're interested in internships, I'd say go to our website and find out where our banks are, and look at those banks, because you'll know that those banks are very sustainably focused. So that's an opportunity as a student for internships or potential first career, for a job. We also have internships within the GABV in our research and metrics team, looking at different data analysis to compare sustainable banks versus mainstream banks and other opportunities. I think on a larger scale, realize that we kind of went through this exercise in Luxembourg, but understanding the concept of money and your relationship with it, and realizing that you actually have a lot of power yourself too in terms of your choices and where you choose to bank. So first look at yourself and see, well, where do I bank? Is my money that I invest or put in a bank account being used for good? So that's a first step you can take as well. And when you do go out and start your careers, think about being intentional in your work. Think about what is it you want to achieve? What kind of impact do you want to have? And make sure that the company you work with is aligned with that, or will give you the opportunity to fulfill that. And if it doesn't align with your values and what you want to be doing and the impact you want to leave, then either stay there and try to change it, or find one that does, that will help you go further in that and have the impact you want to have. Did that kind of answer the question?
Totally, Alice. No, I think that's really powerful to say, hey, we have the power as students to make choices, and we should be looking at organizations and employers that are really doing the real work, who are trying to be sustainable, incorporating the values, and those are the ones that we should be going towards, right? So that's really a powerful way to leave us with. Alice, thank you so much for meeting with us today. I think everyone on the call was really inspired and had a interesting perspective shared by yourself. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and feel free to reach out if you have other questions or want to learn more about what we do at the GABV. Nice to see you, Mana. But good luck to all of you. I wish you a really successful adventure in your studies, but also in your careers. And you've got the world ahead of you. So go out there and do good and make your mark. And I'm really encouraged to see that there's so many people who are motivated and dedicated to making a change. It's encouraging. So someone's got to do the work. So let's do it. So good luck.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you, Stephen. Nice to see you again. We'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Take care.
Alice.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Woohoo! Thank you, Alice.